So tonight we're going to present the 2020-2021 proposed budget. I think you'll find much of it familiar as we've gone through a very organic growing process with this budget. So I'm going to first share that this is available in board docs. This is available under the work session, and then it's also available later in the agenda tonight for when this is under school committee business. In addition, we have some hard copies that Mary Ann is grabbing for us right now. Okay. So what I'm sharing with you is a report, and I'm going to bring you, what I was going to do is bring you through some high-level pieces of the report. I'm clearly not going to read the report to you, but I will kind of pull out some pieces of it. Thank you. It's easier if I can just have you follow. I'm going to grab a couple copies of it so you can follow along. Thank you. Okay, so there are a few pieces. I'm at the beginning of this. There's a table of contents which is similar to the topics that we've been discussing. I'm first going to bring us into page 6, which is just to highlight a couple elements of the fiscal management goals. And the fiscal management goals, we've tried hard throughout this budget season and tonight to make sure that we're sharing our community fiscal resources wisely, purposefully, and responsibly, but most of all to enhance the high-quality education for all of our students. Ultimately, we want to allocate the resources that support student achievement and instructional goals, and we're hoping that we achieve a notable return on our educational investment. There is a summary next, a kind of an executive summary, if you will, where I'm just going to, again, pull out a few pieces from here, where we are working to be a proud professional learning community where we're building upon a collaborative leadership, 21st century deep learning competencies while developing a culture of equity, openness, and sharing of ideas. And we're proud of our ability to use our fiscal resources wisely, purposefully, and responsibly to maintain and enhance the high-quality education for our students, because it is our belief that our students are the most important asset in our community. I also want to highlight if there's a piece in the beginning of this document that we can pull out, as we've crunched the numbers and taking a look at them in many different lenses. We pulled out in this top paragraph here how we are working to represent this year a comprehensive approach, not just with the use of the general fund, but also we tried to take a look at it with the lens of the federal grants, of course, state and local dollars, also the enterprise grants, private donations, and local grants as well. So with that said, the total budget is $64,482,692. The general fund budget, what we're referring to as the general fund budget, is $61,856,830. So that general fund piece, overall the budget has an increase of 0.76. So overall the budget increase, which I know there's a lot of increases, a lot of pieces of this that we peel apart, and we'll continue to walk through it. Our request from the town, and this is broken down later kind of more on the financial aspect pages, but the request from the town is $55,994,773, which is 2%. And then just if we're taking a look at this in terms of percentages, our state aid is 13.22% less than it was last year. So we worked this year and feel that in order for us to sustain and actually move forward with excellence for all of our children, that this request is the essential request. It shows the priorities of what we need. It does have a minimal reduction in staff, but it does ensure that we keep those dollars closest to children. So when we think about the programs that we're pulling out that are highlighted in this budget that we want to move forward and enhance and grow, engage in an engaging STEAM program for our students, expanding our dual language immersion program into grade 5 with the commitment to support a 50-50 model, expanding our language and culture program, our world language program for all students. We're working to do that. Improving our programming for students with disabilities, expansion of social emotional learning and health curriculum, our continued commitment of the visual and performing arts, looking to expand with Project Lead the Way engineering expansion at Curtis Corner and also at the high school, and then also Project Lead the Way STEM programming, looking at that K through 5. Also, our high school will be on a full implementation of the senior project and paper for all students for the class of 2021. And then ultimately, the conduit would be our work around professional learning community and deep learning. We do have to reference and thank the work of all of you, also the budget subcommittee and our leadership team. I feel that the budget process this year was very transparent, and I feel understandable. We worked really hard to listen to folks and provide information in a format that those asked and gave us feedback on. We're lucky to we have a talented group of school and district leaders, outstanding educators, committed support staff, valuable community partners, and highly engaged students and families. And together we're confident that this budget will not only sustain but strengthen our learning community.
Can I just ask a question?
Of course.
Can you just expand upon the world language for all students with this budget? Is that providing our K through 5th grade students with language next year, or where are we with that?
We're working to do that as we plan and move ahead in terms of looking at a dual language immersion program. We're also looking at not only how children learn Spanish through an immersion, but also how they have Spanish language acquisition. And when we look at that, you can also look at a traditional classroom and having access to that as well. So I can't say to you today it's going to be K through 5 next year, but we are looking to see how much we can expand it, and that's our goal, is to provide that for all children. And it will also depend upon, the bucket of money is the bucket of money, and if we suddenly have a significant increase in our student population, we're not going to have an increase in our budget. Mm-hmm. So that will have an impact as well.
Okay. So it's a goal
but it is a goal.
If it could happen for September.
And maybe it can happen in grade 5 and not everywhere else, or
okay.
So we're working.
So the goal is to reach more students with what this budget
each year
allows.
Okay. Each year, absolutely.
Sorry, I have another question about
No.
this as well. How is the 50-50 model at Broad Rock going to look for the DLI? And if you want me to save that for later, we can.
We still have our DLI subcommittee working groups working on that. Okay. So they're meeting. There are 20-some meetings from the teacher level all the way to the working group. Are working on over the coming weeks.
So is that similar to the language that we don't have a definite plan yet, but that's what the goal is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, I now would think that this is also the case with health. My other question was, do we have a plan for implementing elementary health program for September, or would that fall under the same sort of thing, that's the goal?
That's the goal, and again, it depends on. Yeah, if suddenly you find out, you need 5 more kindergarten teachers,
great. When I was
but
reading
that's
through
the
this,
priority.
That's what I was wondering, is if that was a plan or if these are still the goals that we're working
And
towards.
that always happens. We're planning a budget, it's February, and we don't open school till September. But you have to know what the priorities are, and then know that sometimes those are the things that may need to give depending upon if we saw a spike in enrollment. I've moved over to page 11, where I'm just going to pull out to, and I know many of these aspects you've seen. What you'll see here through page 11, through the next pieces of the narrative, which carries us through page 16, are the elements that we had seen from our principals and our directors who had brought forward. It started in kind of the colorful box. If you remember that document, that was the draft. And then last time in the most recent document, it was like a draft version 3. We had just boxed out each department. And now it's embedded through our core, through the lens of a 21st century learning, and then also the professional learning as our core and our foundation that ground us at a school department in our schools. And then we've taken it to have focus areas. And if I can just speak, because I've had a few questions around this professional learning on page 12. So I've had questions around folks saying it looks that like the dollars you have for curriculum have been reduced in the budget as folks have seen different versions be released. And that's true. Our line for curriculum has been reduced because what we've done is put it into the lines for professional development. And so ultimately, we would want folks to not only be working on curriculum, to be professionally growing at the same time. And so you can then, there are many benefits to that from the educator perspective. They're able to grow, they're able to earn professional learning units, but then in addition, we can still produce and have a product when we're done doing it that way.
I have a question that relates to this. It isn't very specific to the budget, but I was thinking about Exeter West Greenwich, where they have like curriculum committees where teachers are both receiving professional development, but also really guiding how curriculum is used, what it is, how it's implemented. And it didn't seem like we were really doing that here, that more it was sort of like, here's the curriculum, deliver it. Are we going more to a model like Exeter West Greenwich? Because I think like data that I've seen shows that that's more effective for student learning, and I just want to check that with you.
So as we work on, and in the regular business meeting, we'll talk a little bit about a recent professional development session that we had here around working on our professional learning community culture. And that's what you describe is when you live a professional learning community. And we're a team of second grade teachers, and we are working regularly to really own our curriculum. And that's instruction, assessment, what it looks like. But there does need to be some commonality. If Marianne and I are both second grade teachers, we can't be off in two different places. So by working on those teams together and making that commitment and having you all aware, so I'm used to having a school committee adopt ultimately the framework of that curriculum. But I agree, teachers should.
I have a follow-up question on that. How does that kind of reimagining the budget dollars that were maybe originally flagged for curriculum and now are going to be under professional development, just in general, how does our investment in curriculum and just like our philosophy on how to build curriculum, how does that jive with RIDE's requirement to like participate in an honors colloquium and kind of go through a process for selecting high quality resources that come from ed reports? Like they're pretty, I mean, I almost feel like some days we're like a watered down adoption state where it's like really dictated what we're allowed to choose from. So I just wonder like how much freedom do we even really have, even if it is looked at as a PD opportunity for our teachers?
I guess I think about what RIDE is requiring, and I've said this to the Department of Ed. I think about it in terms of a resource and not the curriculum. So our curriculum should start with the standards we expect to see. and our children should know what those standards are. But then we should be using common resources that we select. But that book, let's pretend it's a book back in the day, right? That book should not be our curriculum. We should still have a guiding document. We can have supporting documents. We can have multiple resources. Maybe we have one core. Maybe we say Eureka is our chosen math, but we may have many other supplements that fill gaps. Okay. But to say the book is the curriculum, it bothers everything about me being an educator at my core.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know that that's across the state with the Department of Ed saying, here is this list of green dots, select from it. But really, when you peel back what is thoughtful research around helping children learn and grow, and ourselves, which is really important, that adults learn and grow, no buying a book off of a shelf or buying an online tool will do that. And I'm really excited for the work ahead here. And I think other folks are as well. From the conversations we've been having across the district this year. If I'm going to just kind of slide you forward. I know you've seen the calendar before. And then one other piece I want to highlight, and again, it's kind of nice that everybody knows the story this year because we've been working through this journey for a number of weeks now. We're looking at the budget not only in terms of district-wide, but by location. So later in this document, we present the budget, again, not only by district, but there's a form of the budget broken down by building. I know we've analyzed our enrollment and our enrollment trends. I did kind of break out because it came out at the budget subcommittee where we looked at trends of staffing. And so this chart, it's on page 23. This chart is comparing all staff is all staff, so non-certified and certified, and that's an orange line here. Certified staff is a blue line, and it's we're looking at pre-K students to K-12 students, and just comparing the trends that we see in the population increasing or decreasing from one year to another with the staffing. So as we see, just to look at 1920, we had a significant dip in our staffing that was actually more severe than the dip of our enrollment. So just one way, it was just a conversation that we had during the budget subcommittee to kind of take that historic staffing and kind of map it out and look at the percent change. And then I also want to share that on page 23, that the chart, if we did, again, our feedback from our budget subcommittee, page 36 in this document does have the breakdown of the number of each of these folks attached to the budget dollars. So we have the staffing here, but in the budget, in the financials, we also map it back to the amount, how many teachers are there, how many guidance counselors. So it's broken out by staffing. So I know, again, that we've talked last time we met about the staffing considerations and the importance of having a phenomenal teacher in front of a student. I know that we've also gone over the revenue considerations and the expense considerations. And I know this budget does include the Smiles and Cares and intramurals. It does have a few reductions. We're trying to make the reductions as pain-free as possible. And then if I can just quickly bring you through the format for 1 minute, and then I'm going to bother Mary Ann. So in this document, we look at the budget a couple of different ways. So this is what I'm going to call a very high level, where we look at the projected revenue and the expenses at a very high level. And that's our page 26, 27. And then we also look at it, we've shared it by what we'll call a summary on starting on page 28, really begins on page 29. And then starting on page 31 to 32, the budget is here broken down by location. So each building has a column. And then finally, the final way, the fourth way, is that we have it broken down for the general fund on pages 35. It starts on 35 and then into page 36. We have it by object code. And if someone, so for example, this second column where it says 51110, that's what I'm calling an object code. And this is what I was referring to before, where we share out the number of FTEs as aligned to the dollars for this year. But if you are not sure what something means, and we've talked about this before, for example, you don't know what stipends is and it's 51404, we do start on page 39, have those definitions, and we just put that right into this report.
Just before you handed it over, on page 23, there's the anticipated staffing needs, and I noticed on page 13 there's the addition of positions, but I'm assuming there's also, because the numbers don't add up, that we're adding more positions, we're losing positions overall.
Yes.
So I just was interested, and I missed the last meeting, I was sick, so if you already talked about this, ignore this, I can catch you one-on-one.
No.
But I'm just interested in the addition of the LE coordinator and the board certified behavior analysis, page 13. Under people personnel services.
So when we were
teachers, admin, social workers, a mix of both. I was just curious.
So some of these positions, when that's a special ed, so that's a special education goal that they had in their budget moving forward. And so a hope is that they would have coordinators, so a leader, if you will, at each building, helping to help with team meetings. Something like that could be done in a couple different ways. I've had it in a previous district. I know Charity has had it in a previous district where we've done it maybe by stipend. So it may not be a pure FTE. You might already have someone on staff, but they could earn, but we could put a stipend into a grant, into one of the federal IDAB, and then support it that way. Or we could begin to transition it so they have some release time in their schedule, again, as we play with other schedules to see how it what the needs are. We would also always have student needs first. And then the other support for behavior can be on staff, and it could be so what our whole goal would be is there's a retirement somewhere, so we would fill through a retirement and have an opening that way. Or another way is to do it through grants. And again, that's a position that I've historically done through IDAB.
I loved the inclusion of those, especially when thinking about the district mission and our fiscal management goals. It seems like really money well spent. So,
thank you.
I do have one quick question, and I might be missing it in here, but is there a plan for for you to have an assistant or not for this upcoming year? Is there a budget for that if that should arise? Or
so it is in here. The position is in here, but we're still working through the plan.
Right,
We're still
okay.
working through the org chart.
I just wanted to
pull
make sure that
out for a
as
separate time
goes on, that there was a line item for when you're ready to put that in. Okay.
Thank you. So Mary Ann was going to just kind of bring us through some of the high-level pieces in the numbers.
Okay, some of this you've already heard, but we'll go through it again just one more time. If you look specifically at what I would call the summary page of the revenue and expenditures, which starts on page 29 of the document you have. Like we discussed before, the revenues this year are pretty much stable of what we thought we would be receiving. Keep in mind the one item this year that continues to decrease is our state aid to education. We anticipated dropping by about $700,000, and that's because this is the 10th year of the funding formula, and also because of the fact we still continue to have a decline in enrollment. Keep in mind that number may change as final enrollment numbers are looked at, and they are looked at in March of this year, and that's how they determine our final state aid for next fiscal year. And hopefully, with this being the last year of the funding formula, hopefully in the future years it'll kind of stabilize a little bit. But if we continue to have a decline in enrollment, we will see that to decline, but it will not be anywhere near the numbers that we currently have seen or we've seen in recent years. The next items of revenues is federal grants. These are what we call the CIP, Consolidated Resource Plan. It's grants that we apply through RIDE via the federal government. These applications are due. We start this application in mid to late spring, the April-May time. We usually hear back in June and in the midsummer. The amount you see here will change based on what we apply for and what we finally received. It won't change significantly, but the numbers will change based on what we decide what we're going to apply for. Food service is next. Food service is our school lunch program. The bulk of that is based on the sales of lunches and breakfast, also catering service and things like that. We do receive state aid in that area for about $11,000, and then we see federal funds of $358,000. The federal government reimburses us a specific amount, it's not dollar amounts, for paid lunches. However, they do reimburse us for a dollar amount, and it's a fairly significant dollar amount for free students and also a specific amount for reduced lunch students. RIDE grants, these are mini grants we've gotten through the years. Some will continue, some will not. And then we have some other grants. Some of you are familiar, they're foundation grants. The Education Foundation is something we continue, we'll see in the years to come. The next summary page gets you through the expenditures. The expenditures items are listed consistent throughout the different funds that you will see. It's salary, benefits, professional services, property services, other services, supplies, equipment. These expenditure groupings is directed or dictated by us by Rhode Island Department of Education. It's called the Uniform Chart of Accounts. If you were to look at our budget or look at any school district budget across the state, you'll see the exact same thing.
Can I say a question real quick? No, you finish that thought. I just want to put my hand up.
This is dictated by RIDE, and the definitions that Linda just spoke about a few minutes ago determines how we budget stuff or where expenditures take place, and that's consistent throughout the state.
In the case where we have, like an example would be there's an agreement or a contract with Kingston Hill for us to, they're essentially outsourcing their food service to our site. Where does that fall in? Does that actually go under the food service expenses, or is that elsewhere?
Correct. That's where it is.
Okay. And then are there other situations like that?
There's
where
three different
it doesn't
school
necessarily
systems.
depict
There's three what we would call satellite schools that we are providing the lunches for them at a cost that they pay us. And if you remember, about 2 months ago, I provided you with some information that shows that we're claiming about $10,000. It's the Kingston Hill School, it's the Compass School, and it's the Bradley School that's located in the Commons area, over in the Commons. Keep in mind that these particular contracts we have with these folks are annual. They're year to year. So if we choose to, we can decide not to move forward with those contracts in future years. It's year to year.
Thank you.
The next we get into is the expenditures by location. This was the first time we did this year like this. The locations are broken down by the different schools. We also have a district-wide and so also special ed. Just to restate, special ed as it relates to salary, it's a small amount, but that's mostly district-related staffing. The teachers, whether they're teachers or the teacher's aide or the therapist, they're all based on the schools that they are currently working at. The therapists and psychologists and stuff like that fluctuates from year to year, from school to school, based on case needs. That is determined by the administration in the special ed department. As you will see with all these budgets, as we look at them, our two biggest cost factors relate to salaries and benefits. It's usually about 80% of the budget. Some significant changes that have taken place this year in the budget in comparison to previous years, specifically with the general fund, or the operating budget, what we call the general fund, is as it relates to salaries, we have now decided to bring the substitutes in-house. Originally, that was contracted outside. So you will see, when you see that increase, it looks like it says, over, where is it? It's like 568%. It's because it's the reclassification. Before that, it's a contract service, so the account number it was in the 5,300s. So you'll see the same decrease in that area. That is pretty substantial. It'll show a decrease of 100%.
Can I ask you a question about the substitute, just looking by location? Are we dividing the overall number by the schools? And I ask because when I look at West Kingston Elementary School, their regular salary personnel is basically half Peacedale, but the substitute cost is the same between the two. Is that just kind of like we take the money and we assume it's going to be the same across? What
we do is with substitutes, we just allocate it at this point,
and
then once the bills come in, we then charge it accordingly to the individual schools. So there's a few things that you'll see like that happen. What we'll do is we'll roll the number up in one account number, and then as the year goes on and the bills come in, we'll allocate it accordingly. You may see that with custodial supplies. You may see that with maintenance supplies. Although custodial supplies are pretty consistent year to year, but there may be some fluctuation from year to year. So there are some things we just roll up in one number. And because we were showing this by location, we just allocated it out. As we discussed already, the health insurance this year, we originally started at 6%. We dropped it to 5%. We received documentation, a call from the trust who provides our insurance, that they anticipate the insurance going up between 0 and 3%. So this year we budgeted 2%. That's really good news for us as it relates to health insurance. So the health insurance this year is basically leveled funded. I mean, it's going down by 0.53%. And that includes the buyback. We have buyback numbers in there also. Unemployment compensation is dropping substantially this year compared to last year. The reason for that is last year we did have a significant number of teacher positions that were eliminated, and we anticipated some high costs associated with that. This year we do not have that. The position we eliminated are positions that would be eliminated based on anticipated retirements or retirements that we do know that we have documentations for. So we do not anticipate the unemployment costs being that significant. Professional services, there's some ups and downs in that based on historical information and based on what we see happening looking in previous years. A couple of things we did do, which you will see big increases, CARES. We did budget CARES this year at the $32,000 that we originally reduced last year, so that's why you see a significant increase. You do see a drop in our contractor. It says contractor teachers, that's substitute teachers. Under purchase property services, a lot of this stuff is driven by contractual obligations. It's the rubbish removals. It's a contract we've had. Groundkeeping, that relates to the groundkeeping. We have a landscaper that does our groundkeepings, and also we pay for groundkeepings, a charge that we receive from the town for our fields. The rest is pretty straightforward there. Other purchase services is another significant area within our budget. The bulk of this makes up of transportation costs and our out-of-district for students attending, special needs students that attend in schools out of districts, voc ed, and charter school tuitions are also in this line item. The charter school, the voc ed tuitions are budgeted, especially with Narragansett High School, which we've seen a significant increase in the past few years, is based on what I think the enrollment would be, plus an additional 3%. That's why the tuitions increase are higher than the 3%, because we do anticipate more students attending Narragansett. Narragansett started their program. We have about 3 or 4 seniors that are graduating, but we've been averaging about 12 to 13 students in it, so it's an extra 8 students. We had a budget on top of that. And that's pretty much it as it relates to the budget. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about
No.
page 34? All right, never mind. First off, thank you, though. This is, I really appreciate the different ways you've worked the numbers so we can have like a deeper analysis of the budget. I just was wondering, on page 34, the capital improvements, the furniture and fixtures for Broad Rock, does that money include the library and making... like it's significantly more than other, and I'm wondering, I was doing a school building visit there, and it seemed like there was a need to have more flexible furniture, and I was just curious to see, is that what that $20,000 is? It's okay if you don't.
So the building principals built their budgets, and it's hard because they have to take away from other things when they do this, but you're right, the furniture in the library at Broad Rock has been a priority for the principal from day one, before day one of school this year. And her goal is to be able to, she would have similar furniture that
I got it
like
right
you
here.
see in this library here at Curtis Corner.
Yep, I have it right here. According to the notes here, and I'm just looking back at what we have under the budget here, I want to be sure. She has $12,002 budgeted for the library.
So under capital improvements, so if those are considered capital improvements, out of curiosity, and it may just be the way it is, and I'm just speaking out of turn, why isn't that included in like the 5-year capital improvement plan versus, and that fund versus our maintenance of effort year to year to year to year budget, if it's considered a capital improvement?
The capital improvements that you are seeing here are usually capital improvements extends the life of an asset or is an addition or a part of the life of an asset, like a truck or something like that. Furniture really doesn't extend the life of it. We've always done it like that. Linda and I have talked about that, exploring maybe taking a look at that, and also working with Thrive because I really have concerns about if people are using certain things that I really don't think are capital, and it's reducing their per pupil cost, then I think that really needs to be looked at.
The other piece here, I think, is that we're seeing a principal who wants something to be a priority and doesn't want to leave it on the overall capital improvement program. That's the school department working with the town, working with maybe a bond, and wanting to know, like, look, I have my budget, as per law they do, and how can I make sure that I can just have a comfortable place for a kid to read in a library? And I think that it's how we balance all of that. But you want to get the reimbursables when you can and all of that piece as well.
I have a question about the software line. Do we have any information on, so it's just very imbalanced between the 4 elementary schools, what they're budgeting for software for next year. Do we know like what the software solution is that is being rolled out in Peacedale and West Kingston? Do Wakefield and Matunic already have it, and that's why they don't need to budget for it? If they don't have it, is there a plan for it? Is it something that they can pilot? Is there a way to more equitably distribute software investments? Like, I just want to make sure they're at least the future state of our elementary students utilizing instructional software is even between the buildings, so that they're all getting to Broad Rock with the same experience. the same tools?
So we've started the conversation around coming together and working to make sure that there's equality. It's not even it's a level of equity giving, but it's not. It's really making sure that it's a level playing field across. When something is spread evenly, like, oh, we're buying this license and we're spreading it across the district, you'll see it in the district-wide column. So what you're really seeing at the building level is reflective of the needs and the requests at the buildings. And sometimes it is, 2 buildings are Title I, and they may have something extra that they're purchasing to support as Title I would. It would be above and beyond what everybody else would have. But then there is a level of differences that happen, through the P account. Yeah. So, and we've started to work this year collaboratively on the budget. It's a lot to have a lot of other new conversations happening as well. But this is, while it's kind of a hard stop for a moment right now in the budget, we will work to make sure that we are on the same page. It's not only important from a purchasing perspective and from an educational perspective, but then the capacity you can build when we're all on the same page, and the professional development and all that goes with that is really powerful too.
I mean, it's a insignificant line item. I just want to see even investments at Wakefield and Matunic in software.
Yeah.
If it's being seen as valuable to the students at the other 2 schools, it should be seen as valuable at all of our elementary schools.
I do think that's a good point, and we talked about it a lot in the budget subcommittee meetings, that the teachers and the building administrators brought forth what their needs were. So I do think it's important, because if you're looking at it, it's like, well, 20,000 here and 0 there. It's because there wasn't a need this year as they perceived it.
So I guess then my next question would be, do they, at Peacedale and West Kingston, are they aware of a different, maybe is there enough collaboration going on between the buildings where they're sharing with each other, hey, we found this great software solution, we think it's going to be a great fit K through 5, if they don't know that it exists or they weren't part of some sort of evaluation to consider it, then they might not put forth that it would be helpful. So I'm just wondering how much collaboration goes on between those 4 leaders so there is some unity and equality in what they're putting into the budget.
I'm very confident that there's a significant amount of partnership across the buildings, but I can't say that 10 weeks ago that we were in the same place with that. And I think it's getting better every day, not because it has to be, because we want it to be. It's because it's been great to be a part of. With the leadership team that does collaborate. We had a meeting on Monday. We did project these numbers, go through them, work on them, but then life happens. But I think we will just have it happen in the future, because that's what we want it. It's not even like Linda has to ask and then it's going to happen. I think that's the way we're functioning together today with everything we do. And it's a lot more fun and more supportive environment when you do it that way. But it's good for kids, and I think I'm lucky to be part of a team that has naturally gelled together. So I don't think we'll see issues like this before in the future, and I think we'll be able to kind of smooth this over as we move forward. But you're absolutely right. It needs to, and I don't only think about it in terms of level, I think about it in terms of horizontal, vertical. Because we want the same conversations, even if I'm a singleton school, 7 and 8, I don't have other partners in 7 and 8, but I want to make sure the feeder from 5, 6 is making sense, and I'm feeding into a high school. So those systems, resources that we use, we want to be aligned.
So Mary Ann touched on it just quickly about the per pupil and how you can play with the different line items and categories where things are put to change your per pupil expense. Could you that's a common question that's asked of us, is why is our per pupil higher than other seemingly comparable districts? Could we just hear a little bit about where we are with that and what your thoughts are?
So our so when we, so I'm like kind of very official. I have like this, so this is, I just happen to have this open, right? This is like this is 2017-18. Per pupil is calculated by the Department of Education, though, so could we calculate a per pupil on things? Sure, but it is officially released after all audits are complete and reported. So this, right now, the Department of Ed has FY18 released. FY19 hasn't been released yet. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do, because I understand that it's an important topic here, and the budget subcommittee has shared, and we've dug into some definitions and analysis. But it didn't feel right in this report to really highlight and talk about FY18 while this is FY21. But and me being official in black and white, I felt like I needed to use Department of Ed's official numbers. So what I'll do is do a kind of FAQ, if you will, around the budget supporting this document as we move forward into like our work with the town council and our hearings. And I'll do, so I'm doing some analysis, and I've worked with other folks around the state. So for example, this is breaking out the per pupil from FY18 on instruction, on also instructional support, operations, other commitments, leadership, and where do we rank as compared, and then analyzing it that way. I think when you do start to analyze it that way, it's interesting because you start to see, here's another kind of, chart where we're seeing South Kingstown ranked with other districts. So I can kind of, we'll take a look. But again, this is FY18 data because that's the most recent official that we have. So this is showing, this is total per pupil. South Kingstown ranks number 8 this year. But if we look at it in terms of instruction, we rank number 4. If we look at it instructional support, we're now dropping down to 17. So I've kind of looked at per pupil, and where the dollars go. Were they high in 18? Did we spend? There's not much I can do to peel back. We can take a look at, as Marianne said before, we didn't have capital costs going on. I was in a district that did. So that means the pot of money was the pot of money. We could take the pot of money and put it into capital and not put it towards instruction. I mean, I have to credit those that said they want money to get close to kids. I know now that we're looking at our buildings and we're going to focus on our capital. So we'll be okay moving forward, is our goal. But I don't think it's a bad thing that we've invested close to helping kids learn. But with that said, I think it's still interesting to look and see when we peel back where we fell. But I'm uncomfortable, and Marianne and I talked about it, I'm uncomfortable peeling back the numbers ourselves and analyzing it. So I'll dig into more of that, do it so we don't have to sit and talk about it, but I can share at our meetings, but also with the town council, and a little bit of a deeper analysis on a per pupil. Thank you.
I think it would also be helpful, at least to me, because no matter when I look at the budget, through 8 cycles of budgeting, that transportation number, just slays me. So I think if we're comparing, in the research that you're looking at, we're comparing ourselves to districts of similar size, similar makeup, whatever criteria you're using to compare us. And I know that there are a lot of people in our community who, kind of come at us because we have a high per pupil expenditure. I think it might be helpful to point out, okay, so in FY18, if that's the the latest data that you have from RIDE. Yes, this is what RIDE says per pupil expenditure is, and like you said, which I think is very helpful, it's broken down by instruction, support services, et cetera, et cetera. I think it would also be helpful to say, all right, so if we're comparing us to this other district of similar size, similar makeup, similar whatever criteria, their transportation budget is $1 million. And ours is $4.9? $4.5 million. Anecdotally, I went to a Rhode Island Association of School Committees meeting a while back, and I was talking about transportation budgets with a school committee member from a small district. And they said, oh, Michelle, you must have that wrong. It must be $400,000. No. Let me show you. It's $4.3 million. At the time, it was 4.3 when we had that discussion. So I think people need to be aware of the fact that our transportation budget is like larger than anybody except Coventry.
We spend like over $1,500 per student. And when you actually tease out state aid and transportation, basically the state gives us $26 per student. And that's it. And that's like alarming. The state aid and it basically pays for transportation, and that's it.
And I've had this conversation a million times with our state representatives and senators, and they're on our side on this. But we're coming to the end of the funding formula, and assuming that the General Assembly does something new, and I know this is not necessarily a discussion for tonight, we need to try to work to get transportation back into that funding formula. That's one of the reasons that that our funding decreased so much, is because transportation is not even considered in the state aid, or lack thereof, to public education here in South Kingstown. And it's not considered for anywhere. But the urban districts have more reps, and they don't have transportation budgets like we do.
So the final report is out from the task force. It was out January 18th. It's 188 pages for your spare time. But there's not significant change around the transportation. It just came out. So, but I can share the link with you. It'll help it. No.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's helpful. All right, let me see what's next here. So then I guess we are good to move on to, I guess the first item on the agenda we've already called to order is the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll do a quick review of the school committee agreements and norms. To own your impact, be fully present and prepared, trust the process, maintain confidentiality, support universal participation, and challenge ideas and respect people. Reporting of votes taken in executive session. There were no votes taken in executive session. So with that, we just need a motion to seal the minutes.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so the minutes of the executive session are sealed. The agenda for this evening is posted online and might be up on the screen soon. Are there any questions on the agenda as posted? Okay. So we will then move on to the superintendent's report, which I believe begins with a focus on one of our great schools, Matunic.
So tonight, we have our guest from Matunic. So I'm going to pass off to celebrate Matunic, and I'll be your Vanna.
Okay, thanks. Good evening. My name's Liz Maguire. I'm the principal at Matunic Elementary School. Thank you for having me tonight. I just wanted to start. There are many joys to my job. I get to work alongside many talented educators and partner with very supportive and thoughtful families. But my biggest joy is absolutely the phenomenal students that enter the school each day. So when Superintendent Savasano asked me to showcase something that I was really proud about at Matunic, I instantly thought of the great work that's happening by students in our Makerspace. So our Makerspace is brand new this year. We opened it in the fall, and it's titled, and you can see up on the screen, Matunic Vinci Makerspace. A Makerspace, for anyone that might not be familiar with that name, is a physical location. It's a room within a building that's devoted to hands-on, exploratory, and collaborative learning. So when thinking about the theme and the purpose of the room, we wanted to have a cohesive vision and a title that would fit with that vision, which is why we chose Matunic's Da Vinci Makerspace. Many people know Da Vinci is an artist, but some may not know that he's also skilled in other discipline areas like engineering and mathematics and science. He was an inventor. He invented things like, and I could go on a tangent here, but I won't, I promise. But in underwater breathing apparatus, he had basic pulley, he had models of sketches of parachutes, life preservers. So when we were thinking about the Makerspace and how we wanted to tie in STEM, actually STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, we thought that Da Vinci seemed like a really natural fit. So tonight I'm going to show you some photos of the room, how it's set up, and then just a really quick 1-minute video of authentic learning and practice. So the room is divided into 5 centers. There's a general learning space in the middle, and one thing you'll notice, and you can see on this picture, there's some gears, there's a light bulb, there's a mural that's in progress, and we've been really lucky and fortunate to have some of the high school students come and volunteer their time to put this mural together. So this is the Idea Center, and it's the first center that you see when you walk into the room. The basic premise is that it's to encourage new investigations, identify solutions to questions students might have. So eventually I'd like to see a couple devices in this space so that students could use it for research. It's fluid, and pretty much, I kid you not, every week this space is evolving, this entire room. So as you travel down into the room, you'll see a green screen with an iPad. And one thing I should mention is that we had a very generous donation from one of our families, the Moffat family, including their daughter, who spent the day painting and definitely gave it a facelift for sure. But the green screen was a really new medium for us. We're still kind of using or figuring out how to use it. It's really fun to see students create new content, extend their learning by role-playing. They'll put into practice and demonstrate their understanding here. So at the back corner, this is the engineering center. So you can see that there's some student work drying on that table and in the bookshelf to the right. This was work from last week that our 3rd graders partnered with kindergartners, and they had a focus question: how can paper be used to make things? That was it. And that's what they created together. This is a lesson that is tied to curriculum, but what I really want to point out is that the Makerspace also lends itself to cross-curricular learning. It's a multi-age space, which basically just means any child in our school has access to using this space. This is some photos from the lesson last week, and I thought this was particularly sweet because that's 2 pairs of siblings. So they had 45 minutes of being able to learn at Matunic School together. And then this is another slide of just some photos from that same lesson. If you click one, yeah. So kindergarten and 3rd grade in this slide. And then as you move along in the room, you'll see this general learning space. It's a rug. You see the bulletin board in the back. Our art teacher, Mrs. Blakeney, actually painted the title on the back this summer. It's beautiful. And this is a space where teachers can start or end their lesson. They anchor the content or maybe frame the lesson for the day, and they use it just like in this video, free space, move around, test out ideas, practice and put your learning into practice. This is the Nature and Art Center, and we wanted to create like an indoor-outdoor space, so it's thoughtfully placed next to the exterior door of this classroom. We were thinking of incorporating earth life science, and it's a little bit hard to see, but the picture to the bottom right, that's actually lobster crates. The Roebuck family donated those to the space along with the fish tank. The crates serve two purposes. First is a structure to observe and explore, but then it like conveniently doubles as flexible seating, so we always appreciate that. This is the Architecture Center, and you can see how we've arranged some of the storage for the space. I'll just do a little plug here. If you have any recyclables that are in decent shape, we'll take them, bring them to Matunic, free of cost. But this is just an area where kids can test and rethink different concepts. And then this is the front. You can see the murals still in progress on that back wall. This is the Water Center in the front of the classroom. Most recently, this space was used by our fourth graders to test models of ships that they created. So we had 3 different kiddie pools in the front. In teams, students were given a problem to solve, and then they worked collaboratively to plan, test, execute, and then reflect on their projects. So our fourth grade teachers, 2 of which are here tonight, set up some of the models in the front. So if you get a chance, it would be great if you could check out some of their work. So this is just a details slide. In the right, you'll see a white table, but that's actually a table that was painted with dry erase paint. Big shout out to Mrs. Totten. That was a pretty complicated little project, but once we figured it out, it's almost too beautiful to use. And there's a beautiful photo in the left corner. So this is actually one of the images that's displayed in the room and mounted in the room. It ties the theme of the space together. They're all pictures from Rhode Island. Mrs. Ralph actually took these photos and displayed them to tie into the theme of STEAM. And this is just the front whiteboard. We use it to post norms or vocabulary words, a focus question. We can project a short video clip, but it's just a think space. These are some pictures. On the left is a 3rd grade class and a different kindergarten classes on the right. One of the really amazing features that we've put into practice is how we've organized support from our families. So teachers can sign up to use the space and request parent volunteers if needed. Mrs. Totten, Mrs. McGlynn, Ms. Kate Gardner, and Ms. Roebuck have been an invaluable asset and assistance to prepping, to set up, to clean up, to thinking through questions and problems with our teachers. This is actually the 4th graders and some of their model ships that we brought tonight. And I have a quick video I'm going to share, but before I do want to take the opportunity, I'm going to do a little personal shout out, and I know she's here, to Laura Roebuck, because she's been really instrumental in this space. She made this a reality for us. I cannot even begin to explain how much of her personal time, thought, energy, and love has gone into the space. She even got her 3 children, Jack, Chloe, and Nora, to create like cushions. Like it's like a whole little like Roebuck workforce that they have going on. And I honestly feel like I've won the lottery for having Laura in our school. So thank you. And while I've got the mic and my airtime, I'll just do a thank you to our PTO as well. They've been really supportive. They've been really generous. The custodian is super patient with me. Like those kiddie pools that I was talking about, they leaked all over the floor, and he was super responsive and a tremendous help. So I couldn't not say thank you to him, too. This is just one class, a 3rd grade class, and Mrs. Totten created this sign that lives right outside the Makerspace. Yep.
What's the purpose of the straws? To make it flow.
So the clapping was super authentic. It was like an organic moment. It's really beautiful, and I'm very proud of the space for the deep learning that happens here. That's a phenomenal feat in itself, but also because it's really brought our community together, and it really has taken a village. You walk into this space, and I'd welcome any of you to come see it in action, but you can walk into the room and see that students are engaged. They're not just on task, like being compliant with what's expected of them. And they're asking rich questions. They aren't just regurgitating information and spitting back facts. So I'm really proud of this space, and I also wanted to take the opportunity to introduce Mrs. McConnell and Mrs. Bear. They're our two fourth grade teachers. They're happy to run the Q&A session if you have any questions.
I, of course, have a question. But first, thank you, because Ms. Maguire, I was lucky enough to do a building tour, and you are right. Like, in that space, it's amazing, and it's only one of the cool spaces at Matunic. I don't know what is the wellness room called?
So we call it Mindful Me. It's
Mindful.
off the library. Yep.
Yeah, like Matunic, I feel like y'all are using space really creatively to support learning, and it's just really exciting. So thank you. My really important question is, was that Mrs. Haggerty's voice in the video?
It is.
I love her.
The first
She's
two
great.
videos.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That was it. Very important.
Okay, thank
This
you
is
very
awesome.
much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Not on the agenda. Sounds like it. I just want to recognize Liz so how she magically makes the space into from nothing to something. And I also feel like she does that with everybody that she crosses and is with. She's a very special leader, and amazing, just beautiful on the inside and out, and really brings the best out of people, and has been a phenomenal leader for me coming into the community and into the district, and amazing with our entire team. And it's been a joy to be with her. You know, I suggest you do go to Matunic, because I'm telling you, you will leave feeling like, this is why I do this. You know, it's an amazing community there. It's a true learning community, and we're so blessed to have her. And thank you for being here tonight and sharing this one little piece of, of a diamond in a very large, large jewel at Matunic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Can we take just like a couple minutes and go check out the student creations? We'll just take a 5-minute recess. Okay, thanks. Okay, I think we're good to carry on if everybody is ready. I know I didn't. Okay, so we'll continue on with the superintendent's report meeting calendar.
So the next piece is the meeting calendar, and we've been sharing a calendar each meeting, but I do want to add here that we have a we're asking to have an executive session meeting on February 25th at 5 o'clock. It's regarding negotiations. So it's a follow-up that we had talked about before. So this is new. And then the other piece is, so tonight we're in a new space. We had folks share with us the location of the meetings. Previously were at the high school. We had folks share that they were frustrated seeing the screen, and it felt like school committee couldn't see the screen, no one could see the screen. So then we talked about kind of the timeliness of setting this up. This is a little bit quicker setup. So our goal is to kind of try it out tonight and see how folks feel about it after tonight. So that's why there's a little asterisk in here, because we're not sure. We may be looking at moving it to here. But tonight we are projecting to a large screen, and our goal is ultimately maybe to be able to project to both screens simultaneously. So also in the superintendent's report is the kind of monthly update. I've been just sharing an update on enrollment each month. So this is the same, just to kind of show the stats with respect to our enrollment for the month of February, and then it also has the same numbers outlined for the class size at the elementary schools. Also, I'm going to give just a little tiny staffing update, because we will, in your consent agenda, there are resignations that will happen. So as a result, there is the executive assistant position has been posted. The description was updated because it hadn't been updated in many years, and the salary was adjusted to reflect a 40-hour work week instead of what had been a 43-hour work week. So now it just represents a 1.0 FTE. So I've also, in board docs, have put the updated job description, and then also the boilerplate template for the contract for that position. And then in addition, we will have an opening around the Director of Pupil Personnel Services. And so we are now discussing, and I've discussed it with kind of a few folks on the team, the possibility of looking at an interim director as a response to that. It's a funny time of year to kind of be putting out and filling positions. It also, for us, with a lot of new administrators coming together, feels like it's good. We're at a good place gelling together, but then to kind of start with brand new in such a key position, where if so, I've been talking with current leadership on our team to see if there are new ways we can think out of the box for this. With that said, it's a big job, and so we'll keep you apprised of that as we work through that. I also just want to update, on the bottom of this, I'm not going to go through it, is just from last month, and I left it here because there is an appointment tonight for the substitute the interim building administrator. And there, I know there's been some confusion over, we are tonight appointing Lynn Dougherty, Dougherty for that position. Lynn was a she's a retired leader here from the district. I was lucky enough to work with her till November, and she's gracious enough to come back. So initially, the conversation, I reached out. I mean, I'm owning this. I asked her. I love having the leader here. We do have unfilled positions, and we mentioned it before, even around the assistant superintendent. I know folks are lucky enough. I have to get to know my one of my other teammates is Gina Marie Masiello, who's our director of curriculum, and we reworked the STEM position for the director of curriculum. So we still have open an assistant superintendent. It felt like we should carefully walk through that. We also hadn't filled a 0.5 early childhood position yet. We haven't filled that. So there are gaps. So I had reached out to Lynn, asked with those gaps, in addition, we have folks who are participating in the National Institute for School Leadership. We call it NISL. So we have 5 folks that go to that. So that's 2 days a month that you have administrators out. So it does become tricky uncovering buildings. We do, those from central office, try to stop in, but having access to an experienced administrator who has certainly helped mentor me and help with the knowledge she knows in the district felt like a great fit. It's been a great fit. With that said, I also want to recognize that Peacedale has 430 students, as does Curtis Corner and Broad Rock, but Kim doesn't have an assistant. And I, for one, feel that sometimes it would be very difficult, I would think, to be the single administrator in that building. We've had a challenging year there, and we are working through it, I think, very successfully. I'm so lucky to have Liz, who we just sat with. We are a strong team. She's been helping with Peacedale, with as I've tried to, as our Director of Pupil Personnel Services, our Assistant Director of Pupil Personnel Services, as has Lynn as well. So what we did was place the substitute administrator at Peacedale as our home base. And then we just take it day by day. Does she provide mentoring? She does for all of us. And if you know Lynn, you know that. Yes, she does for all of us. But the purpose to have her was just really to support our entire team. And I think she's doing that. I think she's doing it wonderfully. And having our home base at Peacedale has been, I'm grateful for having that. So we're going to walk through the rest of this school year with her on our team. But I know that there have been rumblings in the community, and it felt like I needed to address that and put that out there. The last piece on this section I just want to share, I'm not really going to reference this, we've talked about it before, but I have talked about the numbers I've been crunching as we look at buildings, the space in buildings, what Jacob's report says, what the GIS system says. So this is kind of the chart that I've been utilizing. So it's available here. It's nothing that I calculated, but it is pulled together from a number of different locations. So we'll reference this again in the future. But I've been referencing it, and I had said at one of our last meetings that I would put it out there. I'm going to quickly jump into professional development, and this is just to provide an update for you, and also because it's work that we'll have ongoing, grant funded, but we worked with Tim Brown, who's a phenomenally nationally known leader on professional learning community work. And he came in a week ago Friday, worked with about a group of 40 of us, leaders from across the district, teacher leaders from across the buildings, together. And his handouts are here. I I had a great day. It sounds like everybody else had a great day. It was probably one of my favorite days in this district, sitting and learning and growing with my colleagues here in the district to really have us lay the foundation for how we will function as a professional learning community. The feedback has been really super, and it's wonderful to see pockets of it start as we go off to the buildings. He's a former principal, a practitioner. All of Solution Tree's folks are practitioners or have been. But with that said, he's quite an entertainer. So we had a lovely day. So we're hoping to have him back on our PD day next September, so September 8th. And then we'll also pull back some other folks this school year to work with us around more growing as teams with professional learning community work, hopefully maybe even with the school committee around our collective commitments as a district. Because we find that those core values are critical to us moving together as a professional learning community. I know I'm flying through this, but I don't want to. I know that we have other things to get through tonight. I wanted to just share that we will be opening that initial registration for our kindergarten on February 18th is our goal. And so this window will be that initial kind of opening, February 18th to March 13th. Our new K the kind of rule to the game is that all kindergarten will be entered into the DLI lottery unless they opt out. So we'll have an opt-out form. We've worked through kind of the technicalities. There are technicalities to that. We wanted to streamline it. We didn't want folks to have to enter in a long application on top of all the other paperwork you have to do when you register. So we've streamlined that down to 3 simple fields. We think we have it. We've worked with the lotteries, the company that manages lotteries, so we can import data as opposed to having someone manually enter it. So it feels like that's moving along. Our goal is to run that lottery, if you will, on March 17th. And so we'll my purpose tonight isn't to kind of give you a full report, but just to give you a brief update so you know that we're working on that and to put that date out there, and we'll start to publicize the date. I also want to share, because the questions have been asked, that siblings will be automatic. The next piece of our evening of the report tonight is the audit presentation. Do you want to introduce? Sure. So I'm going to have Mary.
We are required under Rhode Island general laws to have an annual audit done every year. It's done by an outside CPA firm. Bloom Shapiro has been doing our audit. Who's with us tonight is Matt Coit, who's the manager with Bloom Shapiro. He'll go through his presentation. It's a brief presentation. It's similar to what you've seen in previous years. And I'm pleased to report, once again, we did have a clean opinion with this year's audit. I provide you folks all a copy of the audit report, and there's also a stapled document in the back. That document is what's called agreed upon procedures. What we have to have done is with UCOA, one of the requirements of UCOA with the Auditor General is that they do a separate testing, and it's called an agreed upon procedure. RIDE and the Auditor General decides what's going to be done, so they dictate to the auditors what the testing will be done for the audit, and the auditor goes through and follows through on that testing. So at this point, I will turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Marianne. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Unfortunately, this won't be as heartwarming as seeing some of the class projects, but I'll try to keep everybody from falling asleep here. What I'd like to do here is take you through basically kind of the highlights from the audit. And so I'll take you through the audit objectives and reporting, some of the main key points as it pertains to the school department, some of the financial numbers, and you'll see some of the budgetary numbers kind of tying back in. I know you're looking at budget numbers tonight for fiscal year 21. This will be going back to 19, but all pertinent tonight. Going through some single audit numbers, and then as well as the UCOA report, which Marianne mentioned. And I would like to say, I know flipping through all the financial statements while I'm going through this can be a pain, so that's why I've kind of summarized it on the slide, so you shouldn't need to do as much flipping. I'll try to give you out page numbers where some of this information is summarized from, though, should you want a little more color on any of it. So starting with the audit objectives and reporting, as auditors, our job is to express an opinion as to whether or not the financial statements are presented fairly in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So just to clarify that a little bit, basically what we'd like to point out is just to delineate the role of us as auditors versus that of management. Essentially, management's responsible for the financial statements and their presentation. Us as auditors are responsible for the opinion over those financial statements. And that's the opinion that I'll be mentioning shortly. In addition to offering that opinion, whether or not it's a clean opinion or qualified, what have you, we also report on the fairness of any supplementary information in relationship to the financials as a whole. We also look at internal controls over both the financial statements as a whole and then any of the grants that we're looking at and testing as part of the single audit. And then lastly, and I covered it here too, looking at internal controls related to major programs, and we'll touch on that with the single audit, basically in conformance with the federal standards laid out for each individual grant that you folks receive. So getting to the audit highlights, we've issued an unmodified, which is also considered to be a clean opinion on the financial statements. So there's no higher or better opinion that you'd want to see on the financial statements. We don't issue an opinion over the control aspect. However, if there was any significant deficiencies, material weaknesses, things of that nature, we would communicate those to you folks. And there were no such items this year. Specific to the federal major programs, we do express an opinion on compliance for federal major programs. So this is to say, did you comply with all the compliance requirements set out by the federal government for the federal funds which you received? And we've issued an unmodified or a clean opinion on that as well. So overall, clean report, and this is what you'd like for this slide to look like. And I apologize, some of this might be a little tough to see. So if it's helpful, this is Exhibit A4. It's page 91 in the financial statements, but okay, that's a lot better. Perfect. Thank you. So essentially, this is a summarized version of the budget to actual on a budgetary basis. And again, this is page 91 if you want to see more detail. But what this is basically saying is you've got your final budgetary numbers for the fiscal year 19, and then you're comparing that to where you actually came in at. And the goal, of course, at the end of the day is to see a relatively small variance in that final column or to hopefully come out ahead in any of these categories. And so starting with the revenue side, you've got a positive impact here in that you've got more revenues coming in than what you had finally budgeted for, particularly in the areas of intergovernmental revenues, your grants, and then miscellaneous, some of which is investment returns. But all in all, relatively close to where things were finally budgeted at. On an expenditure side, this had came in lower than what you had budgeted. So again, another positive in terms of variance to final budget. There were salaries that finished higher than what was budgeted, but the rest was offset by decreases in employment benefits, purchase services, and supplies, which gave you this net decrease, or I should say lower amount for actual than what you had budgeted for in the current year. So once you take that in consideration with the other financing sources, and those are basically what you're budgeting them at, that gives you a positive performance over the budget of the $170,000. So again, this depending on the year and how volatile the year might be for investment returns or what you may receive for grant funding and how much of that you know ahead of time, these variances can be quite a bit larger. But at the end of the day, what you like to see, hopefully, is a positive variance at the bottom here, and that's what you have. So going on to the next page, this is a year-over-year comparison, and this is on a GAAP basis. And so if you're ever curious about the differences between from a budgetary standpoint to GAAP, if you take a look at the bottom of page 91, there's actually a reconciliation that'll take you from a budgetary basis to the GAAP numbers, which you see here. And so just high level, again, taking you through intergovernmental revenues, starting on the revenue side, you'll see that those had decreased fairly considerably, about $677,000. As was mentioned earlier, it's kind of been an annual, unfortunate thing annually where that revenue ends up decreasing, and it's seen in large part across the state of Connecticut as well, for that matter. The other side of this, too, is the on-behalf contribution that the state provides for pension benefits. That amount went up this year, so slightly offsetting the decrease that you're seeing overall in revenues. Going down to the expenditure side, It was an increase of $1.6 million. There's no individual items that really spike out here. It's really just looking like overall costs, increasing across the board. So, nothing individually major that I would say would benefit pointing out here. Other financing sources and uses. So this is the transfers coming in from the town, and these are essentially, this is up slightly, and this is, as expected, as is budgeted. And this provides you with a net change in fund balance for the year of a decrease in $705,000, which you'll see at the bottom here. And this ending fund balance is really tracking it's a cumulative tracker of, the overall performance of the school portion of the general fund. Going on to the fund balance itself and kind of breaking this down, there are a few different pieces of the fund balance. There's a portion that we consider to be non-spendable because it's tied up in prepaid assets, and it's a relatively small amount, and this is comparable to prior years. There's also committed amounts, both in the sense of there's amounts set aside to balance subsequent year budgets, and that's the $475,000. And then there's also open purchase orders at the end of any given year, and that's the $63,000 that you have here. Again, both relatively comparable with prior years in terms of dollar amount and how this fund balance is split out. So there are a few pages within the report that I'd like to call your attention to that I think everybody is usually interested in. And this first one comes from page 81 in the financial statements. And this has to do with the employees' retirement system for the teachers component of the plan. And this is something that I think draws a lot of attention because folks want to see what the liabilities are associated with these plans. And so if you're looking at this schedule on page 81, it shows you a trend analysis, coming all the way up to 2019. The number that bears mentioning here that I always like to point out is that second number down, that $47,392,000. This is essentially the town's proportionate share of that net pension liability. This is the net pension liability that's associated with the town of South Kingston. And it's estimated actuarially as the obligation for future and for present obligations under the pension plan. So that's what that's referring to. There's also immediately below that number is essentially that portion of the liability that the state is covering on behalf of you folks. And so that's that $35 million that you see right below there. Going on to the next page, this looks at the contribution side of this. And so this is looking at the actual contributions going into the plan by the town of South Kingston. And so you'll see that the actuarial determined contributions, that's what you folks have been making each year. And so that's what you usually like to see here. There are some cases where towns can't afford to do that, and so that's where this starts to get a little gray. You folks are making exactly what the actuaries are saying that should be made every year. Going on to the OPEB plan, and one thing I do just want to point out before we get into the numbers here, this is set up similarly to the pension. The only difference would be, and the caveat would be that this is also including, this isn't just a school department numbers. These are also including town employees within this plan. And so there are certain split outs you can get of this information working with the actuaries and with the town, but I just wanted to put that out there before you look at these and think that might just be related to the school department. Similarly to the pension, however, you'll see that there's kind of a breakout of this net OPEB liability, and you'll see net OPEB liability ending. That's the $3.3 million that you're seeing in the 2019 column. And again, that's basically that actuarially determined liability of what those current and future obligations will be under the plan. And it's essentially just calculating and saying what your total liability is less any of the assets that you have set aside to pay for future liabilities. And so that comes to the 3.3. And that'll give you that 84% that you're funded for a funding percentage of that plan itself. Going on to the next page, this is similar to the pension. This is the contribution side of it. And so the actuaries determine an amount that they recommend you contribute in order to satisfy ongoing obligations. And you'll see actually for the last 2 years that South Kingstown has actually contributed more than what the actuaries have recommended. And this is in large part what's causing that funded percentage to start to rise on the pension, or the OPEB, the OPEB plan. So changing gears a little bit to look at the single audit side, and this is specific to the federal awards, which we issue a single audit report on. Went through the results earlier as far as a clean bill of health, so to speak. So just to give you a little more color on that. Federal awards in fiscal year 19, you had $1.8 million on the school department side only. This is fairly comparable with last year. I think you had $1.846 million last year. So that level of federal funding remained relatively consistent. The major program that we tested this year, and this is the one that we've issued an opinion on over compliance, is IDEA. Then the last piece that I wanted to touch on tonight has to do with the Yuko Report, which Marianne had mentioned. Essentially, as she indicated, RIDE sets out the requirements that they're looking for us to test. And so these data uploads get sent to the state, and they want to make sure that everybody's coding things appropriately. So things like the per pupil costs and other things can be actually measured apples to apples across the board. And so to do that, they set out requirements that they ask for us to look at. And we basically go down that list and determine whether or not there are any issues. We test those requirements in accordance with what RIDE sets out. And so the first thing that we do is expenditure coding testing. We pick a random sample of specific codes that the state's asked us to test, and we make sure that, based on the support, are they coded to the correct places. And we didn't find any findings with that item. There's also a reconciliation that's performed from that upload file that goes to the state to the numbers that are actually reflected within the CAFR itself. And so immaterial unreconciled differences were reported. I think it's $1 from rounding, so that's no real concerns there. And then there's two they call them upload errors, essentially two adjustments that weren't made. The first is due to information that wasn't provided on an invoice, and so there wouldn't have been a more appropriate code to charge to that one. And then the second one wasn't made due to just the timing of the file being received. And the third area, tuition cost coding, no findings there. And there was also no findings with the payroll coding or the professional development cost coding. So I know I went through that at a fairly high level in an effort not to put anybody to sleep, but happy to answer any questions that you might have. Or I would be happy to see the results if it was a town of mine. I know that's not always the case, and sometimes I have to sit up here and present a list of findings, and I don't like to do that. So for what that's worth.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything?
No. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think we'll move on to the financial update within the superintendent's report. Okay.
Yes. So next, Marianne will share with us just a quick financial update for this fiscal year. back to FY20.
I think you're
Mike,
Mike.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is the annual monthly update of our financial position for the current fiscal year. We're still looking, as we've had right along, that our state aid, we do anticipate it being less than what we had budgeted last year by about $35,000. We are running a little ahead in our other revenue, which the bulk of that relates to our trust fund interest income. Our expenditures are running, salaries are running a little under budget right now, and the rest of the numbers are pretty much staying within what we thought. We are seeing, at this point, purchase of services running over slightly. We'll see what happens as the year goes on. A lot of that is purchase orders that we have put in. It's related to tuition items. Sometimes that fluctuates during the year, especially because that involves some special ed students. Usually when we get a purchase order, we put something out as if the student would be out all year. Sometimes they do come back, so that may change. With that all said, we are still looking to the end of the year with about a $400,000 surplus, which is reasonable.
Any questions?
So can we also, I just want to, if we're kind of the end of the superintendent's report, but I also want to congratulate Marianne for the leadership around the outstanding audit report. It's not something that is easy, but she makes that look very easy.
Yeah.
So I think that should be recognized. So thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, but you all have to understand, I'm not a one-man show. If it wasn't for the staff I have, and I mentioned it before, Lynn Gouvin, the auditors will tell you that she's one of the best accounting managers in the state. So I'm not a one-man show. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thanks. If there's no questions on the financial update, then we just need a motion to accept the superintendent's report.
I'll make a motion to accept the superintendent's report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Any questions on the items included in the consent agenda? And if not, we just need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so the consent agenda is approved, and we move on to comments from the community. And I usually have the bylaws pulled up, but we all know them at this point. State your first. Please limit yourself to 3 minutes. Please nominate a spokesperson. Individuals can come to the microphone for one comment. One bite of the apple, as Michelle would say. And please remember to state your first and last name for the record. And please direct all comments to the chair.
Can I just say one thing on that as well? Just make sure that, it's not a question and answer period. You
Right.
Absolutely have the opportunity to make a statement and state what's on your mind or what your concerns are, but it's not going to be a dialogue back and forth.
That's a good reminder. It shouldn't be it shouldn't galvanize a question and answer session, but certainly for any items that are like outside of the current agenda, because that's just dangerous. So. Any community comment this evening?
Hi, I'm Christy Fish. I was hesitant on whether or not I was going to say anything tonight, but I feel like I need to. I know Bretta Combs is resigning, and I just felt that I know a lot of times, especially over the past year with so many people leaving, a narrative tends to go around and be created around potentially why the person left, or I just felt like I needed to honor Bretta as a parent who has had a lot of contact with her over the past 7 years. And I wanted to ensure that part of the narrative, at least, is that I can honestly say with 100% confidence that my daughter would not be where she was today without Bretta. If you don't have a child with an IEP, you probably wouldn't know her or understand, but when you walk into that room and you're sitting at a table with so many other people, and I was an educator for years too, so I know both sides, but so many times I went in there ready to battle, like you're a warrior for your child, and I have to say, most times I didn't have to go there because I felt like Bretta was always on my side and always heard me, and most importantly put my daughter first and advocated for her with me like a partner. So with that being said, our family is very devastated about her leaving, and I would just urge you, when considering filling her position, especially knowing that special education is a priority for you right now, to really, really thoughtfully consider and take time putting someone in that position, because it is such an important, critical position, especially for kids that have IEPs. And it just, it concerns me that she is leaving, and I can only speak for my family. It's going to be a very big loss, a huge loss for us. So I felt like I wanted to honor her and make sure that that was part of what people know about her after she is gone. So thank you.
Any further community comment? Thank you. Okay. Oh, okay. So we can move on to school committee business. The first item on the agenda is school calendar. Is the goal is this just to discuss and look at the information, or is the goal to vote to approve the calendar as it's presented?
Were the results of the survey uploaded, or do we have the results of those?
So I had done, no, there aren't results here. I had done survey, some survey feedback. Also, I've been working with the president of our union and he had done some surveying as well. And then we've been kind of working on it organically. There was, a month ago, the draft was put out at the last school committee meeting.
Yeah.
So this is the same draft, other than there is a change. And I have to say, a lot of feedback just comes to me in conversations. I met with all the PTOs. I've met with, so I was at Broad Rock PTO, and parents there clearly shared with me, verbally, that the parent-teacher conferences. So a parent-teacher conferences bubbled up. And so after putting it out last month, that was kind of the point that came forward a lot. I brought it, Brian and I had another conversation around it, and then another one. And so right now in this calendar, parent-teacher conferences for pre-K to 8, this is a change from what was shared a month ago. Parent-teacher conferences were listed in February in the last calendar we did. November 19th is when they're listed here. So that's pre-K to 8. What we've done is have parent-teacher conferences when we also have high school presentations, senior presentation, if you will, portfolio presentation. Well, we now have senior project. So what we did was put the high school senior project, they wouldn't be ready to present in November, so they would be presenting on May 24th was the hope for the time that the high school would be celebrating their work there. So those are the two changes since the last calendar has been put out. Other than that, what has been shared with folks and what we shared out at the last meeting, I don't think there were any other changes. This is a pre-Labor Day start, and it is similar as much as it kind of can be with our neighboring communities. So it is similar with Narragansett and Charahoe, trying to kind of align with those in terms of vocational programmings and partnerships.
Okay.
With the pre-Labor Day start, have you reached out to the business community and the chamber and so forth? Because it's my understanding for years that the business community requested that we not start before Labor Day because of their labor force. I just wonder if you've honored, if that conversation has taken place, and with Labor Day being so late, I know that brings a different layer onto it, but I just know that's been an issue for a lot of years.
I haven't reached out to the community. I have heard folks have shared that concern. I worked for 30 years on an island community that was passionate about an after Labor Day start. In fact, a neighboring community had in a contract you could never start before Labor Day because of the impact it had on businesses and for children earning money, because it's a nice time to save money. So, but with that said, With this post-Labor Day start, and because it's an election year, so by law we have to have primary day and election day, so September, a day off in September, and then also November, that has an impact. So right now, our last day is still June 18th.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the reality is the calendar year is 180 days, so they're either not going to have their summer job work days in June or July or September. Like,
right.
It just...
The other thing is
Right.
we do have so many
Yeah.
families that have students in multiple districts. It feels like the right thing to do, and that we have heard a lot of feedback that it would be nice to have everybody on a similar schedule. So, I would prefer an after Labor Day start myself, and I've heard that around the community that would be nice, but at the same time, it feels like it's important to really be on the same page as the other districts around us.
I think it's kind of...
If everyone wanted to do it after Labor Day, that would be great.
But I also think when people do take into account when Labor Day is, with that, it is so late this year that if we started after Labor Day, it would kind of almost be, to Stephanie's point, it takes away your June. So I think that's pretty well understood throughout the community, and we've always navigated around that. So I do want to say that I was really excited to see the November parent-teacher conference in there. That's been a pretty big push for a while, and February was always very too late.
Yeah.
And I love that it was able to be worked out with the senior project being in May for the high school, having that kind of agreeing to have that split. And I think that was just a really nice compromise, and I was glad to see that put in there.
Thank you. We'll try it. You have to try it. And you want to just do what's right for kids, right? The calendar should be for our students.
Some feedback that I have heard around the buildings is around the February break. That was typically the time when our custodians would shampoo the rugs and do really the deep clean, and there isn't really that opportunity with the configuration that we have now. In the amount of kids that are out with the flu and illness, it would be a good opportunity to do that. I don't know how we could make that happen without dramatically changing the February break, but one of the days is a holiday, and then the other, it's 2 days on either end, so it doesn't really give them that time to do that. I'm not sure if there's another way to work that into being able to do that deep clean in the middle of the winter, maybe over Christmas. But something to be working with the team about how we can get that deep clean in the middle of the year.
I think you're spot on, though, with this time. So this is the week, that's the peak. I did a little bit of research a year or two ago on the CDC and the flu week, the peak week, and this is it. For like 8 years in a row. This is really when you do want to be fumigating. You want to take care of everything. But with that said, you're right. We did try to play with this a little bit, the February. Like, instead of the Friday, could that go into the 17th? Because with that weekend in the middle, too, it feels a little bit limiting. We weren't able to kind of figure it out. But I'll continue to work with the teacher leadership around like what we can do here. It feels like across Rhode Island, this is often split. Not here, it feels split around, I want February, I don't want February. This didn't feel like the year to make a big change here because we did have primary day and election day, and we're already going late. But we'll continue to talk and research, especially around illness. And every year we say it's so bad, and we're saying it again this year.
Yeah, it didn't really feel like anybody was missing having the week of February off, but it was more the conversations that I've been a part of were more about how do we get these buildings clean without having that week. So, I mean, I'm sure that there's some sort of way to make it happen, but we just have to, I think that's something worth thinking about.
And even like the buses and a lot of other, not just like clean, we're going to make it shiny, but clean, we really need to get in there and take care of a lot of different resources that we use. So, yes, thank you. Well, I understand that's not ideal. I don't know if there is an ideal on it, I do think parent-teacher conferences, I'm very happy that we are reconsidering that. I've always had November conferences, and I've found it, whether you're on a quarter or a trimester, which we're on both here, that falls in a nice place, and feedback has been very strong. Feels like anybody who could grab my ear, that was what they were coming to share. And it's very fair concern. So thank you.
I also want to comment on the parent-teacher conferences. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but, parent-teacher conferences later in the year are kind of irrelevant. We should have done this, we should have done that. Well, in November, let's do. So I think that's really important. I'm asking a question. This is our first year with senior project, right?
We have a little pilot group doing it this year.
But this is our first full year. And so the administrative team at the high school, it feels that the one day is sufficient?
Yes, this is what they've asked for, exactly.
Okay.
And I did ask that it not be on a Friday, that we keep it towards the beginning, just because people could be, the whole traveling with a 3-day weekend, and it just felt like let's keep it away from the Memorial Day kind of mindset and keep it on the front end of that week if possible, but it felt like Chip felt like that worked well for them.
And is this something that will be open to the public or at least to the school committee?
The senior project day?
Yes.
Oh, well, I'll ask, absolutely. I know. It's a great celebration.
It is. It's a wonderful experience.
Any other comments? Okay. Did you know that we were doing all that discussion without a motion? Where was your pen? Click. So is there, we just need a motion to approve the draft? I mean, we discussed and approved it. It doesn't say, that's why I asked at the beginning, what's the goal?
Right. I mean, you don't have to act.
No?
Discussion
Okay.
action allows you to act.
That's why I just was wondering at the beginning, what you need from us, or whether we're just presenting.
So I'll make
I'm used to I'm used to a school committee that usually adopts a calendar. Okay.
Yep.
So I'll make a motion to approve the 2020-2021 school calendar as presented.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so the presented 2020-21 school calendar is moved to be adopted. Move on to discussion on subcommittee meeting updates. Do we have any subcommittee updates for the ones listed here? Budget, I think we've covered. DLI, Superintendent Savastano discussed actually within budget. Do you guys have anything for wellness? If not, that's fine. We can move on.
We did meet. I felt it was a very productive meeting. Gina, actually, it was her first wellness committee meeting that she led with us. And I thought we were very clear and on task. And we really kind of dug into, what did we dig into? We dug into the policy and really kind of went through to try to get some of the wordiness out of it, but then more importantly, to make sure that we were hitting everything that was required of us by the state and make sure we were, citing our general laws and things of that nature. And we will continue that work going forward.
Updates out of building committee, or Sarah's not in here for sustainability. She recused for the calendar, so someone might want to go grab her.
The building committee is now going to work on monthly meetings
Okay.
and monthly meetings in the evening.
Okay.
is the goal. So that's nice.
Okay. Okay. If there's nothing else, we can move on to the next item.
I just have a question about building
Okay.
committee update, if I can.
Going forward, we need the legislative liaison report on the subcommittee reports until the General Assembly closes their session in June.
So can we add that on to the next one as a standing item? Okay. The next item on the agenda is to discuss subcommittee eliminations. So we have a number of subcommittees that are not required, and we're not really, we just want to open the discussion up to determine whether there needs to be an emphasis or even like a designated subcommittee on all of these.
Can I ask a process question? Based on our bylaws, do we need to vote, or is this a discussion and then the chair can eliminate?
That's a good question.
This is just on for discussion tonight. So the thought was to put this before the committee, to open it up to the committee as to what, whether or not particular subcommittees are needed, if the committee wants to keep the committees. The school committee creates the subcommittees, and there's nothing in the bylaws that sets forth as a particular process to eliminate them. So if you create them, as far as I'm concerned, you can eliminate them. Okay. The only one is health and wellness. I mean, that one's required by statute, so you can't get rid of that one. So don't get rid of that one.
Okay. I'd like to get rid of health and wellness. No, just kidding. Just kidding. So I think we have, in some ways, too many committees, because I think we get to that point at the end of the meeting where we go through every committee report and we're losing folks. And there's work that's done that's not necessarily necessary for it to be in a committee. I think one of those is one that I'm the chair of, the NSBA RIASC committee. Not once have we had an NSBA RIASC committee report, because we're all members of NSBA and RIASC, and so I don't quite understand the reasoning. I'm sure there's history behind it about why it's a committee, but I think it's worthy of elimination.
I would agree with that. I think that we all receive the emails and updates, so I would agree with that. Maybe Michelle has some history on why that was there.
I respectfully disagree that those should be eliminated. I think those are our professional organizations. It's mandated by state law that school committee members attend 6 hours of professional development annually, as long as they serve on a school committee. And, when the meetings take place, just by nature of our own schedules, we can't always attend every single one. And so if there was a Rhode Island Association of School Committee meeting workshop that I was not able to attend, but one of my fellow committee members was there and was able to give a brief report out on what went on, because certainly more goes on in those work sessions than comes out through our email. I think that there should be some kind of a reporting out on those work sessions. Now, last year the funding for us as school committee members to travel to the National School Board Association conference was eliminated. Personally, for 6 years, I found that training completely invaluable, completely necessary. And now, granted, the funding for us to travel to that is no longer there, but I think that, there may be the possibility that will be brought back when it's possible. I think it's important for us as school committee members to maintain not just we're all members of Rhode Island Association of School Committees, but that contact, that what's going on in those meetings, in addition to just receiving the emails.
Michelle, if you don't mind, I agree with what you're saying, and maybe it can be put on, like if there's a meeting that we go to, maybe it can be put on as a report out versus having a subcommittee, because it doesn't seem like it's a committee. And like, it's not like a work session that people are actually attending, and it just seems like it could be if one of us goes somewhere and gets information and you just report it, it gets added to the agenda and is reported out that way.
At the college, there are only a certain amount of professors that are allowed to go to each professional development or conference, just because it doesn't make sense to send, everybody for financial reasons, and it seems similar here. But what we're responsible for is if we attend a professional development activity or conference, we're responsible for providing a write-up and posting it, so that the entire faculty can receive the same information, which I think you bring up a really important point, Michelle, and that's something that we don't do. So perhaps there's a way that we could encourage folks who attend professional development to send a write-up to Linda, and she could share it with the rest of the committee. It doesn't necessarily need to be here taking up meeting time at night, but it would be, I think, a great idea to make sure that all members are being brought up to speed with whatever was discussed. Does that sound like that would meet the need without having it be a subcommittee?
I think Kate's right. I don't think it needs to be a subcommittee, but I would like to remind the committee that it's required by state law that we attend 6 hours annually of school committee, school governance related professional development. So, certainly having some kind of, we're supposed to conduct our business before the public. So I would say doing some sort of a write-up and then just sending it out kind of, in my opinion, violates that. But I don't see any reason why we couldn't do, as Kate suggested, when there's a RIASC meeting, that one or more of us attends, there be a brief report out at the next school committee meeting.
The other thing is to point out is I believe there is now a budget line item, and money was put back into the budget to ensure that all school committee members had the opportunity, since it is state law, for us to have professional development. And there is money, right, Linda? There is a line item.
$5,000.
Yeah, $5,000. So there is money in the budget this upcoming year for professional development.
So I think that there's a lot of work that we do as committee members, school committee members. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need a subcommittee. One example, I think, as we said, is NSBA and RIASC. There's a way to put that on the agenda, share publicly reports of what we're learning and gathering at different events we go to. I would wonder, for Emily and Michelle, if the Augusta Hazard Scholarship Committee is the same. I don't know that year-round there's like a committee of people meeting and moving a subcommittee agenda. Is that more of like once a year there's an update on the agenda?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would think that in the beginning of each school year, or at the time when the scholarship applications are going to be anticipated, that we could have that as an agenda item and select 2 members of the school committee to be in charge of reviewing those applications and then selecting the awardees.
I think that makes sense.
I think that would be sufficient. Do you agree, Michelle?
It has been a subcommittee, but not a regular subcommittee. It's been a subcommittee that is appointed by the full school committee, after each election, and then that subcommittee just meets once the chairperson or one of the subcommittee members gets the information from central office that the applications are ready. So it is a subcommittee, but it's not like a regular subcommittee that meets every month or every X number of months. And so the responsibility is the people that serve on that. I don't know what you're going to call it if you don't call it a subcommittee. The people that serve on that subcommittee have to have no stakes in the game, so to speak. In other words, no relatives that are going to apply for the Augusta hazard. And then the subcommittee is not responsible for meeting until the applications are ready to be reviewed, and then we report out to the full school committee. That's the extent of that. That's certainly, if you're looking to put subcommittee reports on a school committee agenda, that doesn't need to come on once the people that are going to serve on that subcommittee have been determined. And typically that's been through the election cycle. And then again when the selections are made and the recommendations are brought forth to the school committee. So I don't know what you're going to call it if it needs to be a. I mean,
think it could just be an agenda item.
It's a subcommittee. It doesn't need to meet every month to be a subcommittee.
So I guess we're hoping to find opportunities to kind of streamline and not have such a clunky, long, unnecessary list of subcommittees. If it doesn't really function like a subcommittee and it's just kind of a once-a-year special task.
If it's a scholarship if it's a scholarship selection, so all of our subcommittees should be public meetings. So I don't know. I'm going to pull the new kid.
It's not normally discussed publicly. So in fact, it should not be a subcommittee.
Okay. I mean, I'm not sure how it's been handled. You can have a subcommittee to just.
It's like a work group.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with the particular scholarship or what the I don't see any reason why you need a subcommittee. I mean, you can certainly appoint members to review and make a determination, and then bring that to the school committee. I don't know what I haven't reviewed the bylaws or whatever it is for that particular scholarship, the requirements, but that would. Subcommittees are typically open to the public. I mean, they should be. So if you're going to be
historically has not been open to the public. It's a day or two selected by the two members, and the applications are all reviewed. So I don't think it needs to be a subcommittee.
You don't need you can appoint. The school committee can, suggest or appoint particular members to review the applications
at the time of the year when they are.
And then discuss. I mean, depending upon how it's normally awarded, it can be brought up in a business meeting.
Okay, so basically, it doesn't really meet the requirements of what a subcommittee is, so it doesn't need to be called a subcommittee. So are there any others that kind of stand out similarly to that?
So the district
can we kind of flag
crisis
those?
committee, I'm not sure if it's a requirement or not, but, well, number one, we haven't met in a year. And also, when the district crisis team does make updates, they come and do a report out to us.
Right.
And so again, it's kind of, it was similar to Sarah's point with the NSBA RIASC. It's not necessarily a subcommittee that I need to report out on, because the two leaders come and do it.
Yeah.
So that could be eliminated.
Okay. Any other discussion points?
Isn't the district crisis? Isn't the district crisis committee a staff committee, Ms. Savastano?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. So that's not one of our subcommittees anyway.
Right. So it's still a committee, but not necessarily
not a school committee.
subcommittee.
Right.
So that feels like that's the better
It also
way to
feels
run
like DLI is in that same boat, where we have Jody leading the DLI work at this time. I don't know if how other people feel about that, but it feels like the work is being done by district admin, like the organization of those groups?
We formally pulled back together the DLI subcommittee
they're
that
kind
had
of-
been selected in the spring, had them meet. Then from that 35 group member, they broke into 2 working groups, and then they're coming back to the DLI subcommittee to report out their work.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
we've
how
made that
Jody's
commitment.
handling it, and
Yeah.
with
So it's
Sarah.
back with the,
It's with Sarah
So
helping.
Jody gave
And
a
we've made
pretty
that
extensive
commitment.
presentation on it, was it last month?
Yeah.
On kind of like the workflow that the 2 different groups, I do think, especially with new leadership and like extending into a new grade level, I think it's pretty important to keep that intact and like have
I
a
just wasn't
solid
sure if
process
that
for,
was being led
stakeholder
by the
feedback.
school committee or by
I
Jody
think
at
it's a
this
really
time?
good model of like a partnership where for the subcommittee work, Jody and I are working together, but then Jody leads the work groups off of the subcommittees. So it's a nice model for, I think, community engagement that's still administrator-led, if that makes sense.
any other discussion?
The contract compliance, does that fall under the building committee at this time?
That's, I mean,
What other
that's,
contracts are, you know?
right, that's basically the contract that would be in question
Seems
for
like
that,
all the
yeah.
contracts that we're looking at are part of the building committee, so
Yeah.
I wonder if that's really more of a subcommittee of the building committee? I mean, that's, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it feels
I'm not trying to get rid of all the committees, it's just
Yeah.
if we're talking about them.
There's administrative oversight on all of them
Right.
too, though, and then it does get, you want to make sure that we are following the proper law with posting what we need to do publicly and all that goes with that. So if we're not doing something, then or we're not utilizing it, then it feels like the next meeting, maybe we should consider it.
Right.
The contract compliance, if the building committee has taken its place, is that how it?
I think it's taken over its,
Right.
it's not. It's not.
So the history behind it, I think, is when we were first picking the individuals who were going to do the work, which we already have them, we have the contracts. Now, it may come back to fruition, like stage 3, going forward, but again, I think that it's not necessarily a subcommittee because, again,
Right.
there was no public meetings, there was no nothing, it just was who was responsible for it.
Sometimes you have liaisons.
Correct. Yep.
I've seen where folks do once a year with the school committee a list of like liaisons, and these are the folks who will, and you put on this agenda under business reporting out for that, but it's not a formal subcommittee.
Okay.
So it feels like
That
we have
makes
a few
sense.
of those, so maybe we can organize that piece.
So where are we at? We're at NSBA and RIASC, right? Augusta Hazard Scholarship, the District Crisis Committee and Contract Compliance, those are the ones that you folks are considering?
Yep.
Okay. Well, there's no cutting tonight. We're just
Discussing.
I just motioned it, so it was like discussion.
Just-
That was my discussion.
yeah.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Any further discussion? Okay. So we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion on identifying a liaison for CLAC. So is there a motion to open that up to discussion, please?
I'll make a motion to open discussion of a liaison for CLAC.
Okay. So Alicia Collins decided to step back from her role as liaison for CLAC. So we need to, I'm honestly like not familiar with what was involved with that liaison position. If we can get some background on it, I don't know if, I'm not sure what would go into it or what is really important and critical to that partnership. I don't know.
Before Ms. Collins did this work, I did this work. and it's that communication with the CELAC committee and attending their meetings, which are not very often. Do you know what night they're held? Wednesday nights? I'll take on that work if you would like.
It's just a discussion item, so, okay. So can we add it? Thank you for offering.
And it can appear on next month's.
So we can put it on the
business-
next month's
correct.
agenda? Is there anybody else that has any input to that, or are we just all expressing our gratitude? Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Next item on the agenda, we need a motion. Yeah.
So I can reach out to the CELAC people without stepping on any toes, just as a committee member?
I don't see why not. I mean, as long as you're not appointed as the official liaison until the school committee does the actual appointing. But I mean, as far as CELAC works, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be receptive.
No, because their group is open to the public anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, we need a motion to discuss and potentially adopt the fiscal year 21 budget.
I make a motion to adopt the fiscal year 21 budget.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? We did dive in pretty deeply earlier. Any final comments or questions?
I have a comment. This is my second budget cycle, and I really, really appreciate both of you, Marianne and Linda, and the entire team that's been involved. This has felt so transparent and clear and not stressful, and that's good for our students, and that's really good for us on the school committee to really understand this well. So maybe it's stressful for you, but I feel like I could analyze it from a bunch of different perspectives, the way you put so much detail into it and how transparent it was, and I'm just really grateful, basically, so thank you.
Anything else?
This is my 8th budget cycle, and I would like to also express my appreciation for all the work that goes on behind the scenes, and I circled this when we were going through it, because when we go to the town and say that we're looking for 2% more than last year, you're well aware that we're going to have some council members and some community members that are going to be, you always want more money, you have less children. But I think that it ought to be overemphasized that if we look at our budget compared to last year, it's only 0.76% higher, and our state aid is 13.2% less. I think maybe we could lead with that and then put our numbers forward. I don't know if that's possible, but thank you very much for the, and I know I've asked you a few times for some information, so thank you.
I already said this during the last meeting, but just telling the story and expressing where the priorities are so that you see where the money is going. I just think that it's really, really important, and it's so clear when then you look back at the buildings to see where it's allocated by buildings, and then to also have the codes be broken out and explained is very helpful. It would be great to get that transportation number down, but I know that your entire team worked really, really hard at looking at all different ways, along with the transportation subcommittee, to do that, and the number where you landed is where we landed. But in terms, the other thing that I wanted to say, in terms of the way that it's laid out overall, not just by building, but to also see the percentage of change is really helpful in terms of analyzing the numbers. So I enjoyed being a part of the process. I think the budget subcommittee was really, really helpful, and helpful for the town council members to be there, able to be there, part of it to say, what his viewpoints were and to be able to ask questions and then reflect upon those before having open meetings was great. And it also made it so that we weren't here until 1 o'clock in the morning, kind of teasing out all those details and figuring out those questions. So that was great too. Thank you for all the work that went into this. This is a lot.
Okay, so we can move to a vote to adopt the fiscal year 21 budget. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll move on to the change of town council and school committee budget hearing dates. They want to know if we can change from the 15th and 16th to this
Either
a week earlier?
6, 7, 8, or 9, it would be 2 nights. I did share that the 7th is a Tuesday. Normally, we do stick to Tuesdays. So they're looking. We've had on the schedule. We've looked at many times the 15th and 16th, knowing that this is the public hearing, the 2 public hearings that are back to back. So they're just the town manager is asking if there are, if we have recommendations out of those, or I guess basically, a night that is just absolutely not going to work.
I would personally love if we could change it to the 8th and 9th, but that's just me.
I have a question. So I can't do the 7th, but I don't know enough about different faith communities, and I think Passover begins on April 8th, and I just wonder, does that impact some folks participating? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer on Passover, but I think
that's a pretty significant holiday. So why don't we not entertain that option? Why don't we look at?
Hold on.
6 and 7?
Let's just go down the line and let Michelle finish on her availability.
So during that week, I can do 6, 7, or 8. I can't do the Thursday night. Do they need us for 2 nights?
They said they need 2 dates, if possible.
So this is the public hearing. So this is when the public is sharing to you all their input. So it's important.
I am technically available that entire week. My personal preference would be the 8th and 9th. For personal schedule reasons.
These meetings start at 6:30?
The originally scheduled was for 7 p.m.
Okay, I can do the 6th and 7th.
I could do 6 and 7.
Sorry, Stephanie, I can do 6 and 7.
I can do any time that week, but I think that we should do the 6th and the 7th.
Okay. So is there a motion to recommend changing those 2 budget hearing dates to the 6th and 7th of April? All in favor? Second, sorry.
I second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, next item on the agenda is a discussion on increasing the RGB award. There's an attachment there. Is there a motion? I think the motion needs to be to approve, and then we can discuss. So, okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Right. Any discussion points on the attachment there or questions?
I did have a question on it when I was reading over it earlier in the week, and I was a little confused. So to date, we paid them the 101 38619, and we left the balance of 153581. And then now we want to pay them and pay them what they've done work for us, and we should pay them what we owe them. But I'm curious, if the total amount owed to them is 520616, why are we only approving the 367035? What am I missing there?
The $1,500, the $1535.81 is the remaining amount in the contract. The extra are the two other numbers. The extras are the testing of that was done by Vortex, asbestos testing, and the printing and mailing of materials.
So we're only approving the newest stuff, but why are we leaving the balance there?
We're not. The balance will disappear. The total amount owed to them is $5,000. The amount we're asking for the approval of the increase of their purchase order is the $3,000 number, the 3670 number.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah.
Michelle has a question.
So, I don't know, maybe it's just too late, but I read these numbers earlier. We owe them $5,206. They're asking for us to pay them $3,670. So the difference between those two numbers, we're not going to pay them? The
original contract was the
922. Okay. I can't.
I'm asking to increase the contract to 106,592, and that increase is $3,670.35.
So, why are they asking? I know you're asking us, but why are they asking us for this additional money? This is for the work at Matunic.
The additional money that they're asking for is stuff that was not included in the original contract. Asbestos testing was something that was not anticipated. They came across something while they were doing the work, and they had to come in and test it. So they hired the contractor immediately to get that testing done to not slow up the process of the job. Mm-hmm. The second one is reimbursable expenditures, which relates to printing and mailing. It's the plans that they may send out to engineers and stuff like that when people are designing. Like it's with HVAC, they had to have an engineer on board, a mechanical engineer to do the design. So when you take those two additional amounts, it's the 7035.
And so they didn't anticipate encountering the asbestos? And they didn't anticipate the printing and mailing? Wouldn't that have been part of the original?
What they've done before, which I've since changed, they always had a paragraph that said reimbursable expenditures up to a certain dollar amount. I've since advised them that dollar amount is now going to be in the contracts that are approved going forward, and that's what we did with the recent contracts. We just did that with the vestibules with the security.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions on that, or can we move to a vote to approve the additional expenditure?
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Sorry, Marianne. Okay. So, if we pay them this $36.70 additional money, we're also still going to pay them the $5,206.
No. It's if you take the 36 plus the 1,500, that adds up to the 5,000. The total amount we'll be paying them is $106,000. So it's not the 36 plus an additional 5.
Okay. So the new contract, instead of being the 102,922, it's 106.
Correct.
592, which is a little less than $4,000 more.
3670.35.
Which is Yeah, which is, okay.
Okay, we good? Okay, so we'll move to a vote to increase the RGB award. Is there a motion? Or there already was. All in favor? Aye. Okay, next item on the agenda is in regards to the OPM for the security projects and Peacedale parking lot. So is there a motion to, are we looking for an approval on what? Is this a contract? Is a discussion and action, so I'm just not sure what the motion needs to be.
Should I try?
Yeah.
Is the motion? I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposal from OPM services from Bentley Construction and Downs Group.
Perfect. Okay. Any questions or discussion? Yeah. Okay. All right. So if there are no questions, then we'll just move to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Okay. And that concludes the school committee business agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you all.